Trust can be such a fragile thing. When it is betrayed, it leaves a hole that can almost never be filled. The situation becomes worse when it's broken by someone you'd never expect. In 2007, Oakland, a tranquil and picturesque town nestled in Northern California, was surrounded by dense forests and winding rivers. With a population of just over 3,000, the city was known for its close-knit and friendly community. Everyone here knew each other by name, children played freely in the streets, and no one felt the need to lock their doors. Yet beneath this seemingly serene surface lay hidden secrets, much like in any other community, capable of unraveling the foundations of the most sacred institutions. Families. The Malik family had long been regarded as the epitome of respectability. Caleb Malik, the family patriarch, was a successful businessman, owning a small construction company that renovated and built homes throughout the area. His wife, Aliyah, devoted her life to managing their home and raising their only daughter, 15-year-old Michaela. Michaela was a quiet and unassuming girl, well-liked by her teachers and classmates alike. She was known for her kindness and sincerity, and her academic performance earned her the admiration of both peers and educators. However, everything changed on the fateful morning of September 17th. The day began like any other. Caleb, as usual, rose early to get to work, while Aliyah busied herself preparing breakfast. Slightly sleepy, Michaela came down to the kitchen, where hot toast and a glass of freshly squeezed juice awaited her. The usual conversations about the day ahead and plans to meet friends after school filled the cozy kitchen at 7:45 a.m. Wouldn't you love to subscribe right now, as this documentary gets interesting? Caleb kissed his daughter, as he always did, and walked her to the car. He drove Michaela to school every day, despite the school being just a few blocks from home. It had become their family tradition, spending those final moments together before the day started, discussing news, making plans, or simply listening to the radio. Michaela got out of the car near the school, and Caleb followed her with his eyes until she disappeared behind the school doors. He was confident everything was proceeding as usual. Returning home, Caleb grabbed his portfolio and headed off to meet a client in a neighboring city. Meanwhile, Aliyah stayed at home, continuing her daily routine, cleaning, cooking lunch, and planning the family dinner. However, by noon, things began to take a troubling turn. Aliyah received a call from the school. Michaela hadn't shown up for morning classes. At first, it seemed like a strange oversight. Aliyah immediately called Caleb, who dropped everything and rushed back to Oakland, his mind racing with thoughts. Perhaps she had gotten sick and hadn't made it to school. The initial anxiety soon gave way to panic. Caleb and Aliyah began calling Michaela's friends, teachers, and classmates, but no one had seen her since she got out of the car that morning. Caleb then went to the school, searching the surrounding area, hoping to find some trace of Michaela. He asked everyone he encountered along the way, but no one had seen her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. By the evening of the same day, when none of their attempts to locate their daughter were successful, the Maliks contacted the police. The officers arrived quickly, but their faces were full of doubt. In a town where nothing serious had ever happened, Michaela's disappearance came as a shock to everyone. The investigation began immediately, but the first hours and even days yielded no results. In a town where everyone knew each other, news of Michaela's disappearance spread like wildfire. Soon, all the residents of Oakland were aware of the tragedy that had befallen the Malik family. Neighbors came to express sympathy and offered their help, but no one had answers to the most pressing question: where was Michaela? Initial searches by police and volunteers yielded no results. The forests surrounding the town, the river flowing nearby, and even abandoned houses were all carefully examined, yet it seemed as though the earth had swallowed alive without a trace. Caleb and Aliyah were consumed by a constant state of anticipation, waiting for someone to call and inform them that their daughter had been found, but the phone remained silent. Every day, despair consumed them further. Caleb felt a growing sense of guilt, repeatedly returning to the school, the place where he last saw his daughter. but each time he left with nothing. Aliyah, too, withdrew into herself. Her eyes became empty and devoid of life. The Malik house, once filled with laughter and joy, fell into an oppressive silence. Thus began a tragic story that would soon shake Oakland to its very foundation, revealing the darkest sides of human nature. The disappearance of Michaela Malik sparked one of the largest investigations ever conducted in Oakland. In a small town where, for decades, crime had been limited to petty theft or domestic disputes, this sudden disappearance was a shock. The police immediately mobilized all available resources. The investigation initially focused on the most obvious possibilities: runaway, kidnapping, or accident. The chief of the local police department, Jackson Miller, an experienced officer with 20 years of service, knew that every minute counted. He dispatched several patrol officers to interview neighbors and check nearby houses, parks, and wooded areas. Jackson Miller, an experienced officer with 20 years of service, knew that in cases like this, every minute counted. Without hesitation, he immediately dispatched several patrol officers to interview neighbors and check nearby houses, parks, and wooded areas. The Malik family quickly became the center of attention, and the headquarters for the search operation was established in their house. Gradually, volunteers began to gather at their homes, eager to help. On the kitchen table, where only recently there had been morning toast and juice, there were now maps of the area, task lists, and duty phones. Despite their anguish, Caleb and Aliyah continued to try to hold on and help organize the search, but with each passing day, their hope began to dwindle. The police began reconstructing the chronology of events on that day. The first step was to review the CCTV camera footage near the school, but the results were disappointing. As luck would have it, the cameras had been faulty that day, and no video footage had been preserved. This left the detectives with nothing to cling to. Jackson Miller, carefully studying the testimonies of Michaela's parents and friends, noticed something odd about Caleb's behavior. While Aliyah appeared heartbroken, her husband seemed unnaturally composed and controlled in his emotions. This raised questions among the investigators. Miller decided to take Caleb in for questioning to delve deeper into the details of their morning farewell to Michaela. During the interrogation, Caleb spoke confidently about his actions that day. He described how he had dropped Michaela off, watching her disappear behind the school doors, his voice calm and his answers clear. Yet, Miller couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He pressed Caleb, asking about the smallest details, what Michaela had said before leaving the car, whether there was anything unusual in her behavior. Despite his training, Caleb struggled to provide detailed responses. His answers remained cold and devoid of emotion, only intensifying Miller's suspicions. The investigators also began to focus on other aspects of the Malik family's life. Rumors began to circulate that not everything in the family was as perfect as it had appeared from the outside. Neighbors reported hearing screams from the Malik house at odd hours, and they noted that Ailia had become increasingly withdrawn in the past few months. However, there was no direct evidence tying these rumors to Michaela's disappearance. Amid growing suspicion, the police followed various leads, searching the homes of individuals known to be involved in the area and interviewing anyone who might have relevant information. Each time a potential breakthrough seemed close, the trail would inexplicably disappear, leaving the detectives more confused. Meanwhile, the relationship between Caleb and Aliyah continued to deteriorate. Aliyah became more and more withdrawn, spending her days in silence and refusing to engage with anyone. Her constant questions and accusing glances began to irritate Caleb, who became increasingly distant. They spoke less and less, and a heavy silence settled over the house. Aliyah stopped going outside, refused to eat, and gradually lost strength. Her condition became a cause of concern for friends and neighbors, but she continued to distance herself from everyone. At some point, Aliyah began to suspect that her husband was hiding something from her. She remembered how, in the past few months, he had been leaving for work earlier than usual and returning late in the evening. Despite her mounting doubts, she couldn't shake the feeling that Caleb was concealing some dark truth. Caleb grew increasingly secretive. His phone was constantly on silent, and he seemed to deliberately avoid conversations on certain topics. These thoughts tormented Aaliyah, but she didn't know how to confront him directly. Meanwhile, despite all their efforts, the police investigation began to stall. Miller understood that time was against them. Every day that passed without results diminished the chances of finding Michaela alive. Yet, he refused to give up hope. He continued to work tirelessly, studying new evidence, following leads, and attempting to piece together seemingly disconnected facts. Toward the end of the second week after Michaela's disappearance, as the investigation appeared to be reaching a dead end, unexpected information came to light. One of the local residents, driving past the forest on the outskirts of the city, noticed something unusual in a clearing among the trees. Curious, he decided to investigate and stumbled upon a sight that shook him to his core. What exactly this local resident discovered remained unknown to the public, but the police rushed to the scene. Chief Jackson Miller knew this could be the key to uncovering the dark truth that loomed over Oakland. And what that truth might reveal was something many in the town wished to remain hidden. When Miller received the report of the suspicious discovery on the outskirts of town, his heart sank. The forest, located just a few miles from Oakland, appeared impenetrable and foreboding even in daylight. Upon arrival, a thick fog descended upon them, shrouding the trees and giving the area an ominous and eerie appearance. The local resident who found this strange object was waiting, his face tense and anxious, pointing to a barely noticeable trail leading deeper into the dense woods. Miller and his team proceeded cautiously, making their way through the thick underbrush. Eventually, they reached a small clearing, hidden from view. In the center stood a dilapidated wooden barn, long abandoned, its front door hanging askew from years of neglect. As Miller approached, the weight of what might be found pressed heavily on his shoulders. With each step, the tension in the air thickened. When Miller opened the barn door, the sight inside confirmed his worst fears. On the floor lay an old, faded jacket, the same one belonging to Michaela. Scattered nearby were her textbooks and notebooks, which appeared to have recently been in her backpack. An empty backpack lay open beside them. The items they found confirmed the police's deepest fears. Michaela had been here, and it appeared she had been harmed. Miller immediately ordered the area to be cordoned off and began a thorough investigation of the barn. Every item, no matter how small, was carefully collected and sent for examination. The police knew that what was now at stake was not only finding the missing girl, but also uncovering the truth about what had happened to her. As the experts conducted their tests, Miller made the difficult decision to return to the Malik family. He understood that the discovery of Michaela's belongings might be overwhelming, especially for her parents, but he couldn't afford to withhold the truth. Upon entering the Malik house, Miller noticed Aaliyah sitting on the sofa, her head buried in her hands, while Caleb stood at the window, gazing into the distance, as if trying to avoid the police chief's gaze. Miller took a seat across from them, and, carefully choosing his words, spoke about the discovery in the forest. At first, Aaliyah couldn't believe what she was hearing. She jumped to her feet, demanding answers and blaming everyone around her for failing to protect her daughter. Caleb remained silent, his face unreadable, but Miller observed how his fingers tensed, gripping the windowsill tightly. The investigation into Caleb's life deepened. The more the police delved into his affairs, the more disturbing details emerged. First, it became clear that the family's financial situation was far from ideal. Caleb Malik, once regarded as a successful businessman, had substantial debts he had kept hidden from his wife. His construction company, once thriving, was now on the brink of bankruptcy, and he had been desperately trying to conceal this from Aaliyah. You seem to be enjoying the documentary. Subscribing gives you better access to more. just like this one. Further investigations also revealed Caleb's connections to dubious individuals, people with possible ties to criminal activities. These findings raised serious questions about whether Caleb had any involvement in his daughter's disappearance. The once seemingly perfect family was now unraveling, exposing secrets and suspicions that would rock the very foundation of Oakland. These people often visited his office late at night, and some were even spotted near the Malik house in the dead of night. Caleb claimed they were merely business partners, but Miller couldn't shake the feeling that these coincidences were too eerie to ignore. Investigators began reviewing Caleb's phone records and emails, which revealed messages from an unknown subscriber persistently demanding large sums of money. The messages were threatening, growing more aggressive with each new communication, leaving Caleb visibly panicked, though he chose not to share this distress, even with his wife. In parallel, experts continued analyzing the evidence found in the barn. Signs of a struggle were clear, along with traces of blood belonging to Michaela and another chilling detail: fingerprints that didn't belong to any member of the Malik family. These prints belonged to a man Caleb knew well, though his name would shock everyone once revealed. Miller began to realize that behind the Malik's facade of a calm, successful life lay a brewing storm. Caleb Malik appeared ensnared in a dangerous game from which there might be no escape. But the question remained: was his daughter truly a victim of these circumstances? Or did Caleb have a more direct role in her disappearance? The questions only multiplied as the investigation deepened, and the answers grew more elusive. The picture became more complicated and disturbing with each discovery. Miller and his team were now on the brink of uncovering a terrible secret that could shatter Sandal's entire community and destroy the Malik family forever. These people often visited his office late at night, and some were even spotted near the Malik house in the dead of night. Caleb claimed they were merely business partners, but Miller couldn't shake the feeling that these coincidences were too eerie to ignore. Investigators began reviewing Caleb's phone records and emails, which revealed messages from an unknown subscriber persistently demanding large sums of money. The messages were threatening, growing more aggressive with each new communication, leaving Caleb visibly panicked, though he chose not to share this distress, even with his wife. In parallel, experts continued analyzing the evidence found in the barn. Signs of a struggle were clear, along with traces of blood belonging to Michaela, and another chilling detail: fingerprints that didn't belong to any member of the Malik family. These prints belonged to a man Caleb knew well, though his name would shock everyone once revealed. Miller began to realize that behind the Malik's facade of a calm, successful life lay a brewing storm. Caleb Malik appeared ensnared in a dangerous game from which there might be no escape. But the question remained: was his daughter truly a victim of these circumstances, or did Caleb have a more direct role in her disappearance? Lieutenant Colonel Carl Crofter was suspended for 7 days after his victim was murdered. The questions only multiplied as the investigation deepened and the answers grew more elusive. The picture became more complicated and disturbing with each discovery. Miller and his team were now on the brink of uncovering a terrible secret that could shatter Sandal's entire community and destroy the Malik family forever. Having discovered the documents, Ali felt the ground beneath her feet vanish. The man she had trusted for her entire life, the father of their daughter, may have been involved in something far more sinister than she ever imagined. Memories flooded back, his increasingly secretive and nervous behavior in the months leading up to Michaela's disappearance. These thoughts consumed her, driving her to the brink of madness, yet she couldn't bring herself to share her doubts with anyone, not even the police. Meanwhile, Jackson Miller and his team pressed on with the investigation. The evidence found in the barn confirmed that Michaela had been a victim of violence, but who was responsible remained unclear. Caleb Malik emerged as the primary suspect, but without concrete proof, the investigators were left with suspicions and unanswered questions. Miller couldn't ignore the mounting evidence that pointed to Caleb's involvement in his daughter's disappearance. But without clear proof, the case remained frustratingly complex. One day, Aaliyah could no longer bear the uncertainty. Overwhelmed by her mounting doubts, she confronted Caleb directly. She demanded answers about the mysterious bank transfers, but Caleb's only response was to clench his fists and turn away, unable to meet her gaze. The silence and evasiveness were too much to bear. This confrontation was the tipping point. For the first time in years, Aaliyah openly defied her husband. A bitter, explosive argument erupted between them, during which Aaliyah accused Caleb of hiding something, perhaps even being involved in their daughter's disappearance. In a fit of rage, Caleb snapped back, his words laced with anger and despair, accusing Aaliyah of being blind to the reality of what he was going through. His bitter declaration only intensified Aaliyah's suspicions. After that confrontation, their relationship was irreparably fractured. They began to live like strangers under the same roof, each existing in their own world. The facade of a functioning family dissolved, leaving behind only tension and silence. Both knew that the truth loomed closer with each passing day, and it could destroy everything they had once built. Despite the growing chasm between them, Aaliyah refused to give up. Driven by her need for answers, she dug deeper into Caleb's past, searching for any clue that might unravel the mysteries of his secret life. Meanwhile, Miller and his team pursued every lead, uncovering more and more troubling evidence. Each new discovery pointed further toward Caleb's dark and hidden role, inching the investigation closer to the terrifying truth behind Michaela's disappearance. However, while these events unfolded, Caleb became increasingly ensnared in his web of lies and false explanations. He knew deep down that he could no longer conceal the truth, and the moment would soon come when he would have to face the consequences of his actions. But what truth lay hidden beneath his silence, and how deep was his involvement in Michaela's disappearance? These questions continued to haunt him, leaving him trapped in a state of fear and paranoia. One thing, however, was certain. The resolution to this nightmare was approaching with relentless inevitability. As the investigation reached its climax, tensions in Sandville surged to unbearable heights. The police sifted through more and more evidence, each clue revealing a more troubling picture. Jackson Miller, who had dealt with deception and lies in his long career, felt that he was nearing the breaking point of the investigation. He could sense they were closing in on the truth, though it was shrouded in darkness. Meanwhile, Aaliyah Malik clung desperately to hope, determined to uncover what had happened to her daughter. Caleb, however, became increasingly distant and withdrawn, his behavior raising more suspicions. Miller knew this was the moment to act, when even the most elusive of suspects could crack under the weight of evidence. At the start of the 5th week after Michaela's disappearance, the police received crucial results from their forensic investigations. The fingerprints found in the barn, smeared with blood, didn't belong to anyone in the Malik family. They belonged to Edward Harper, a longtime friend of Caleb. This revelation shattered the illusions that had surrounded Caleb's innocence. Miller, seizing the opportunity, decided it was time for another interrogation. He called Caleb in for questioning once again, but this time with the explicit goal of breaking his composure. During the session, Miller confronted Caleb directly about Edward Harper and their relationship. For the first time, Caleb, who had always maintained a cold and calculated demeanor, began to lose control. His face drained of color, and his hands trembled uncontrollably. He tried to deny any connection to Harper, but Miller, sensing his unraveling, didn't relent. Step by step, Miller pushed harder, presenting the evidence: letters, financial records, and the damning fingerprints. The walls Caleb had built began to crumble. Under relentless pressure, Caleb finally broke down and confessed. He admitted that his financial troubles had driven him into desperation. Edward Harper had approached him, promising a solution: an insurance policy that would cover all of Caleb's debts in exchange for Michaela's life. Caleb had initially resisted, but Harper's threats and manipulations gradually wore him down. In the end, desperate and consumed by guilt, Caleb agrees to go along with Harper's plan. On that fateful day, Caleb drove Michaela to school as usual, but Harper insisted they veer off into the woods. He assured Caleb everything would look like an accident, and that Michaela would be safe. Caleb, torn between fear and guilt, left his daughter with Harper, believing the man's hollow promises. The next day, Caleb realized the truth. Harper had no intention of letting Michaela live. You seem to still be enjoying the video. Wouldn't you like to subscribe to gain access to more videos just like this one? Overcome with terror and guilt, Caleb couldn't bring himself to come forward, fearing the consequences. Instead, he tried to hide his involvement, believing that if he stayed silent, he might shield his family from further pain. But the truth could no longer be buried. The weight of his guilt, the relentless investigation, and the memories of his daughter pushed Caleb to the brink. His once structured life was now shattered, and the realization that he had played a part in his daughter's fate would haunt him forever. But as the days in prison dragged on, Caleb Malik sank deeper into despair. The full weight of his actions crushed him. Every moment in his cell was a reminder of the monster he had become, the life he had destroyed. His days were filled with endless regret and isolation. He knew that no apology or regret could ever undo the pain he had caused, nor could it bring back his daughter. In the quiet corners of his mind, Caleb wrestled with the unbearable truth, his complicity in the disappearance of Michaela. He isolated himself from the other prisoners, unable to face the judgments and condemnation. The world outside moved on, but inside his mind, he remained trapped in a cycle of guilt and remorse. Edward Harper, who had masterminded the crime, met a grim fate. His death sentence was carried out swiftly, but even his passing couldn't provide solace for those left behind. Aaliyah, too, could find no peace. After leaving Sandville, she never returned. The town that once held so many memories of her family became a place she could no longer bear to call home. In a small, quiet town far from Sandville, Aaliyah built a life of solitude, haunted by the ghosts of what once was. Years passed, but the grief never truly faded. She visited her daughter's grave often, each visit a painful reminder of loss. The small monument now stood as a solemn testament to Michaela, a name etched in stone that never ceased to break her heart. Caleb, meanwhile, lived out his days in the shadow of his past, trapped in a prison of his own making. The once prosperous and respected man had become a shell of what he once was. The love he once shared with Aaliyah and the memories of his daughter, all were reduced to distant echoes of a life he could never reclaim. In Sandville, the town never fully recovered from the dark revelations. The once tranquil community now bore the weight of a terrible secret. Those who once admired the Maliks could never erase the memories of their fall from grace. For Aaliyah, the pain remained, a constant reminder of the life that could have been. Time may have passed, but the scars of loss and betrayal shaped her into a woman who would carry the weight of her tragedy forever. Over the years, Sandville changed in ways no one had anticipated. The once thriving town, filled with neighbors who knew and trusted one another, became distant and guarded. The memory of the Maliks haunted the streets, and the peaceful facade of Sandville was forever marred. People whispered in hushed tones, avoiding topics related to the family who had once been pillars of the community. The Malik name became synonymous with tragedy, and those who dared to speak of them did so with a mixture of fear and sorrow. Aaliyah Malik, having relocated to another city, sought to escape the pain that had consumed her. Yet, no matter how far she went, the memories of Michaela clung to her like a shadow. In the quiet of her new life, she often found herself staring at the horizon, wondering if her daughter was watching from beyond. Her days were spent lost in thought, consumed by a grief that refused to let go. Occasionally, she wrote letters to Michaela, letters filled with regrets, love, and the endless longing of a mother who could never forget. These letters, though never sent, were her only means of finding solace in a world that felt empty without her daughter. Oakland, now a town of whispered memories and unspoken fears, tried to move forward, but the Malik story lingered, etched into its history as a dark reminder of what had transpired. The townspeople, once close-knit and trusting, grew more cautious. Parents shielded their children with wary eyes, and the sense of community began to erode. No longer was Sandville the idyllic, peaceful place it once was. Now, it was a place haunted by the echoes of tragedy. Though life resumed, the people of Sandville could never erase the memory of that day. The tale of the Maliks became more than just a part of the town's past. It became a cautionary tale, a haunting reminder that evil can exist in the most unexpected places. In Sandville, the notion of safety was forever altered. The bond between people became weaker, and their trust forever scarred. And as much as they wished to forget, the story of the Maliks remained, a grim marker of a town forever changed by darkness. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more gripping stories and thought-provoking content. We look forward to hearing your opinions.